Hello, and welcome to today's 18-group webinar on unifying client data to accelerate insights and deliver better experiences. My name is Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor here at 18 Group, and I'll moderate today's webinar. Our expert speakers today are Louise Head, Director Performance Analysis at Federated Hermes, Julia Bartnesser, Senior Vice President, Head of Data Architecture and Salesforce Development at Voya, and Dan Roberts, Solutions Engineering Director at MarkLogic. I'll ask the speakers to introduce themselves in just a minute, but first a couple of things for you so that you can make the best of today's webinar. To the right of your screen, you'll see a panel with the two columns. The first one is for questions. So if you have any questions for our speakers through the webinar, please do submit them there. We'll take the questions and ask them throughout the webinar so that they don't get lost at the end. So please put your questions there and we'll answer as many of them as we can. To the right, you'll see a panel for polls. We'll be running 3 polls today, so do please answer the questions so that we can get some idea of what you're thinking about some of the topics we will be discussing today. So questions and polls, I'll tell you when they're coming up, and please do take part. That would be great. So enough of me and over to our speakers. Louise, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Louise Head, and I head up the performance analytics team at Federated Hermes. And I can tell you one part of my role is all around data. So we control all the performance data for the business for all our public markets and private markets products. So what I'm trying to do today is to bring another perspective to data from a data domain owner. So I hope you enjoy it, and on to the next person to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Louise. Julia, coming to you.
Hi, I'm Julia Bartnesser. I am in charge of enterprise data, enterprise architecture, and CRM at Voya. And my job at Voya, since I've started over 3 years ago, was to build reusable data capabilities to support all of the businesses. And we have moved, we don't have regulatory drivers for our data program, but we do have business drivers. And one of the interesting developments I have seen in the past 3 years that we have moved from using data for efficiency to using data or leveraging data to grow the business for business strategy. And that's the perspective that I would like to bring into this conversation.
Excellent, thank you. I look forward to it. Dan, over to you.
Thanks very much. Yes, my name's Dan Roberts. Effectively, we work with our clients to help them extract more value out of their data. And I guess, as you can imagine, in typical enterprises today, that data is fragmented everywhere, which means trying to get a good sense of it tends to be quite difficult. So we work with our technology and our consulting organizations to realize some, I guess, digital transformation type projects. And some of those are in wealth management firms, and in the buy side have really focused around some of the successes with how they work with their clients and their client applications.
Okay, thank you all very much indeed. And just before we start the discussion, let's run one of those audience polls. And the question is, what are the challenges of data management at your organization? You can tick as many of the boxes as you like, so please carry on and do that. While I come to Dan to help set the scene and talk a little bit about data management challenges buy-side firms are wrestling with.
Yes, so I guess just to kind of carry on what I was just saying, we're trying to work with our clients so they can get more value from their information. And I think that the key thing is that they're all on a journey and they're at different stages of that journey, trying to understand what that data is, how it can help their clients, how it can drive their business, and how can they get a good sense of what their business is. In the buy side, we typically see this, people trying to get information around portfolios and positions, their trades and their trades histories, and so they can better serve their clients, and so that they can also get some deep insights from that data as well. It's all very well having point applications and silos of data, but actually the challenge they have is, how can we get deep analytics from it? How can we really build some predictive models which will help drive our business forward, and of course compete. Many of our organizations that we work with are large investment banks with wealth management firms, and of course they need to remain competitive, because otherwise their lunch will get eaten by some of the new entrants, which we see with their slick mobile applications, which are, of course, being used by a new generation. So how can they protect the users which they have and their clients which they have, and how can they attract new clients as well. So those are the kind of challenges which we're seeing from a data perspective in our clients.
Okay, lovely. Louise, as a practitioner, what would you say there in terms of the challenges?
Yeah, so we have various different challenges depending on what data you tend to want to give to your clients. So standard sort of data that Daniel was talking about in terms of portfolio holdings, etc. That's sort of bread and butter to a lot of buy-side firms, but it's all the extra data elements, not just your stock standard performance analytics data. It's all the added value data that the clients now want, and the bespoke type of data that they're requesting. And one of the things that we as a firm are struggling is with the demand on these data sets, whereby you will have to go out to various different vendors to be able to get this data and then integrate it back into internal systems to then be able to report it in a what we'll talk about later on, is whereby we look at the sort of the entire view of what we want to report to our clients on, and based on their needs. And I think this is probably the most difficult part at the moment for a lot of buy-side firms, is bringing all that data together to be able to give those clients, what they want from their portfolio analytics.
Okay, thank you. Julia, what's your experience here?
So I would like to echo what Dan and Louise has said, and take a little bit of a step back into the business problems we're trying to address with the data programs. So one of the things that we have seen in the industry is a lot of challenges in terms of profitability of investment management buy-side firms. There is a lot of margin compression that's going on. There is a huge drive towards no load and type of investment vehicles that further compress the margins. There is a lot of consolidation going on in the industry as well, and having that a lot of the income just derives from assets under management. If you don't have a huge amount of assets under management, you have a lot of compression of how much you can invest into your systems and into the people within the company. So how does data help with that? And one of the dimensions that I'd like to talk about is data for the distribution. Basically, how do you make your sales teams as effective as possible? You cannot hire an army anymore. So you need to make fewer people be much more effective. And that's where the data, both internal data that you have, and plus external data, third-party data, second-party data, becomes really key. And the analytics and the reporting that comes from that data and can be served really easily. That's why, like, the three part of my team, the CRM that seems kind of a little bit to the side between enterprise data and architecture, comes into play, because you want to make your salespeople as effective as possible. So bring data together, make it really understandable through business analytics and from data machine learning and so on, and then serve it up really easily through your CRM systems.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's quite a lot of challenges, but all good. Let's see the results of the poll, if we may. Okay, those legacy systems are out there again. And Louise, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think in terms of legacy systems, one of the things that we find is the amount of work involved on our IT side to be able to keep those legacy systems running to the demand that we require. But the fact is, if you want to get off those legacy systems and then go to new systems, then you then have the other challenge where you may not have the budget to be able to go out and get that all singing and dancing system. So really you're constrained in what you can do. So you're stuck with having to improve your legacy systems, which may not be able to give you everything that you require.
Okay, Dan, would you like to comment on that poll result?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, that's precisely what we're seeing. The challenges within our clients is they have a whole bunch of legacy systems with poorly governed data in, which means actually getting any real value from it becomes very difficult. Those siloed data items siloed databases make it very difficult to gain that insight. And be agile with how they move forward with their systems. That's the perennial challenge. And I guess the traditional way of building applications is the business says, I want a new application, and all this does is create a new data silo. And of course, we need to start thinking in a different way. We need to stop the ever-increasing data silos, which we've seen over the last number of decades, and start thinking what about data as a data platform or as a resource in a single information space that we can then drive our applications, our internal BI reporting, and of course, ultimately serve that data up to predictive models and machine learning, so we can, really gain some deep insights into it. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I think, even things like client reporting, which we're seeing in some of our customers, is a real challenge because of fragmented legacy systems and data silos. So we need to kind of work towards, overcoming this fragmentation challenge.
Okay, well, we're going to talk lots about that later on. So before we talk again, let's run one more audience poll. This time, the question is, what is the split between regulatory compliance and customer data insights in terms of driving your data management at your organization? So give that a bit of thought, and let me come to you, Louise, if I may, to ask your opinion on what extent firms are driving change to get a better understanding of their clients, or is regulatory compliance really the priority still?
So from our firm's point of view, you've sort of got both that are important. One of them is whereby it's more keep the lights on. So the regulatory aspect of it is that's something you need to do, but it's more keep the lights on. Whereas the other side is about looking at, other projects where you can investigate the full client experience. And what that might mean is you might get an external consultant in, or you might have someone internally that can do analysis around, what are clients wanting out there, and what can you build within your current infrastructure to deliver as much as you can to that client. So I think, other buy-side firms will have other projects, like change projects, where they will include an aspect of looking at what they need to deliver to clients to keep up with the rest of the market. Because if you stay the way you are, then maybe you won't get that big sell that you're after. You'll just sort of keep just going on gradually without improving your business.
Fair enough. Dan, what would you say there?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I think if I go back and look at some of the projects we did a few years ago around MiFID and data governance, that was seen from our perspective at that point, a big priority. Of course, regulation is ever ongoing and changing, and so those systems are really important and in place. But I think what a lot of those regulatory projects actually drove into business was the importance of A, consolidating data, and B, data governance. So ensuring that all data is modeled in a similar way across the organization, so it can be reported on quickly and easily. Now, I think we're seeing this evolve into buy-side firms where they're trying to manage their clients, trying to provide services to their clients as well, so they can get the slick mobile application and so the sales guys, the relationship managers also have the right data at their fingertips, so they can sell the next appropriate product to their clients and be able to be really productive in sales. And so we're seeing this data governance moving into and consolidation of data moving into that aspect of the wealth management business, and our clients have been very much working on that and trying to understand a complete view of their clients. They're looking at their high net worth individuals and their ultra high net worth individuals. How can they understand not just the portfolios and transactions, which I think Louise perhaps mentioned, but also how do the clients' networks of other individuals that they know, how do they interrelate with one another? How can they look at this deep, in-depth understanding of maybe some unstructured content and information they have about their clients, but also still consolidate it with the products they've bought and the interests which they have from an investment perspective. So it's pulling all of this data together in a governed manner, which we can then use to drive systems and build better analytics.
Okay, let's look at the poll results and see how people are feeling about this one. Oh, Julia, you didn't speak on this question. What do you think to that?
I find it interesting that regulatory compliance 100% is now at zero, that there is actually a lot more business driven, that I think what I'm seeing myself. I like, again, in Voya specifically, it's much more around customer data insight and business driven and business growth. But I'm also seeing a lot more of that now business. So I find those results not what I would have expected.
Okay. And Dan, what would you say?
Interesting. Of course, from a vendor's perspective, we see specific clients' projects that we get engaged with. It doesn't surprise me that regulatory is still important. And I think we see people that struggle with ongoing regulations which are coming out, and a need, of course, there's a real business imperative that they meet those needs. So building a regulatory platform to help, I guess, make it quicker to onboard new regulations and report on those will be crucial. But I'm maybe slightly surprised that it's 75%, 25%, but
maybe that's just our audience today. So anyway, thank you all for voting. And let me come back to you, Louise, if I may. So at a fairly high level, what approaches can firms take to gain a better understanding of their clients and improve client data? So imagine you're coming to this for the first time. What are the sort of things you need to be thinking about?
So, going back to what I had said previously, I think as a business, you need to look at it from every angle in terms of one, exactly what clients demand. And then once you do that investigation, then you can take that information back to the management group and say, well, this is what our client is demanding. How can we deliver this? And I think what you'll find is that's quite a big project and something that might take quite a few years to do, something that we have been doing for a couple of years. And I think it's also good to do that type of analysis to come back, because what I'm finding is that in the market, a lot of businesses are getting resource constrained due to the amount of bespoke type of reporting that they're having to do for clients. And I think a lot of firms need to step back a little bit and have a look, okay, what can we do to create a standard client experience, and what does that involve? And then put money towards it to try and be able to deliver that to clients. Because the more that you create bespoke type reporting, the more money that you're going to be spending on that, rather than, initializing on the onset to create a project to be able to deal with all those data elements, to pull those in to deliver that data to your clients.
Okay, that's interesting. Julia, what would you say there in terms of a sort of top-down approach to start with?
Yep, I'd like to echo Louise's words. Start with very important to ask, start with the business use or with the business purpose. Why is it? What data do we need for what? What's the demand from the client? What's from both external and internal client? What data do we need, and how do we need it to drive our business outcomes? So that's very important. Start with the business outcome, and keep in mind that some of the business outcomes, as Louise said, is multi-year. So define business outcomes at the level where you can start delivering value much sooner than the end portion of it. So deliver in an iterative way, deliver value early and often, and look at the data that you have. Standardization that Louise mentioned is really important, because otherwise it never ends. Customization never ends, and the demands on data never ends, and there is very little value. I'm going back to the notion of the business value from data. If that link is broken, it never works. It gets divorced completely. The data program gets divorced from the reality of the firm, and the data programs either die or they just don't support business, and you don't see the return on the investment that you would want to see from your data programs.
Yeah, we absolutely see that. Absolutely see that.
Okay, that's a good start. Thank you very much indeed. And staying with you, Julia, in more detail, what practical steps can firms take to consolidate data, create a 360 view of that client data, and apply advanced analytics? And what are the challenges along the way?
So the challenges, I'm going to start that we've talked about. The data is all over the place, and it's in legacy systems. So practically understand what data you have. Where does it live, and what's the most valuable data sets? The second practical step, and I'm preaching to the choir, master data. have a single view or single unique identifier. And I'm going very technical here, but that's such a foundational notion that it's kind of the first practical tip. Single unique identifier for everybody you work with. For any, however you define the client, have a unique identifier. Make sure that you can tell them apart. And you know when people or companies change addresses, so you don't have multiple data sets, and then you have no idea what's real and what's not real. Try to create a program or not program, but mechanism, tactical mechanism to bring the data together as quickly as possible. So don't over-engineer. Don't try to standardize every single piece of data, as long as you can combine multiple data sets across the common keys. So concentrate on common keys, on being able to tie in different data sets together. And then create a self-service environment for your analytics and data science teams to create those business insights and to be able to connect into your other systems so you can serve them up easily. So never forget about data integrations. People think, okay, we'll do master data, we'll bring all the data together, we'll run our data science. How do we deliver that? That's data integration. And sometimes that's depending on, again, legacy systems, siloed data, siloed business, and not standardized processes. That last mile of delivering your insights to the appropriate, to the customers, to internal customers, to make them actionable. People forget about it, but that's very complex. So plan for that complexity. Don't forget that last mile. It's not magically going to show up somewhere. It needs to be delivered, again, early and often.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Dan. Step by step.
Really to follow up on that point. I mean, many of those points, Julia, are kind of music to our ears of what we're seeing with clients that we work with. Absolutely. I guess my first step would be to realize that additional data silos through applications is not a sustainable strategy. You need to have a strategy of consolidating data. Consolidating that data, in the first instance, Julia's right. You want to pull that data together, but you need to deliver a little and often. So we work with our clients to consolidate data. Okay, we've got all our data together, but it's not curated, and we haven't chosen all the data elements which we want to work with to drive our business APIs or our business requests. So that portion of we pull the data together, and then we start to iterate and deliver quick, iterative business values to our clients, so that they can drive analytics, build a customer interaction, build an internal application, and so on and so forth. So it really is. The initial steps is consolidate that data, drive the data which you curate together for systems based on what your business requirement is right now, and then of course keep going as your requirements evolve. And typically that's how our projects work, and that's how we work with our data platform to follow that iterative path of small deliveries.
Okay, that sounds excellent. Thank you both very much. And let me come back to you, Dan. That's how you do it. What do you do it with? What kinds of technology solutions and services, maybe tools, can help you? And is there a role here for machine learning and AI yet?
Well, yes. I mean, machine learning and AI can exist in many different places, but I guess I'll probably start with how we work with projects. And the tools and technology which we have is essentially designed to bring a repository of enterprise data together, which we then augment with active metadata and use that to provide APIs back to our business. I mean, this is distinct contrast from the typical and traditional approach for getting value from your data, which is ETLing it from different places. It's all called different things. All the data is labeled in different ways. It becomes a very difficult project then to try and build a schema or a view of all of that data. It's not really sustainable or doable because of the complexity of it. So bringing it together, then changing it iteratively over time, and we provide tools to help and allow you to do that and build solutions for our customers. Now, I guess the ultimate for the business is to have a well-governed set of data which is labeled the same across the entire organization, so we can drive analytics, machine learning, predictive models, all of that good stuff within our organization. But does machine learning take does it exist within the actual platform which you might be storing that data? Can we use machine learning to help us consolidate schemas together and to match and merge data together? So we're talking to Julia was mentioning about addresses being mismatched or names spelt incorrectly. So we've actually done quite a bit of work. I mean, we have machine learning capabilities in our platform, and we've been looking to see how we can leverage that to streamline the merging of schemas and data and duplicate data for the mastering of data within our platform. So lots of good stuff, and so I guess it's really focused around choosing the right tools to help you implement those types of solutions.
Thanks, Dan. Julia, what would you say there? What kind of technologies, solutions, and sort of services, tools have you found helpful, or do you wish you had?
There are lots of tools on the market, and a lot of fintechs and new companies springing up. I think like 5 a day that bring some kind of aspects of either machine learning and AI to the either data or analytics part of it. Kind of foundationally speaking, what I think is really important is public cloud technology is to enable to bring the data and use all the capabilities that public cloud provides. Because one of the things that we need to understand is that a lot of things that we try, some will work and some will not work. And what public cloud gives you is the ability to fail quickly and the ability to build resiliency in how you deliver. So you don't want to have, if you bring in all this data for a specific use case and it didn't work, you don't want that to kill your data program. You want that to be fast and cheap. So decreasing the cost of failure and the time to failure, I think that's the biggest benefit that the cloud gives us. If we have, because we can engage different tools, and it's so much easier to spin up the solutions and try things out. So kind of from the foundational perspective, is enabling all of the data analytics on the cloud, I think is key. The second one around AI and machine learning, when I have seen the use of that, I think on the AI side, it's understanding the data that you have that comes from multiple sources. So you have a lot of usage for, let's say, natural language NLP type of technology. Just getting the data out of the documents or out of the interactions or out of your call center calls, transcript or what have you. On the machine learning is creating analytics and next best actions to serve up to both internal and external teams based on all of this data. You really need that, because if you don't, we don't have time to go and standardize every single piece of data coming from our legacy systems. So we need to have techniques that allow us to combine this data together and derive insight from them and deliver it to our customers. And that's where machine learning, data science plays a great deal. And there is definitely enough maturity in the space and enough tooling and experience to be able to do that now. Again, it all depends, but you do need to have the data. And you need to be able to connect the data sets. I always go to that because people can sometimes kind of forget, because data science is really cool, and figuring out the common keys between two different data sets is really not cool.
Okay, thank you. And Julia, staying with you, this has been mentioned earlier. How important is data governance, and how can data quality be ensured? Because as you say, the data is the main part of it and the rest is cool, but quality and governance are super important.
Yes, so data governance is business ownership of data and business understanding of data. And a lot of it, so I will go back to one of the things that I've talked about as things to do mastering data. So you can't really master data without having data stewardship process in place, and pretty mature data governance. If you think about how do you tell two clients apart, at some point you need a human. And to have that human whose job it is to do it and have an established process and have a tool and supporting it and having all the checks and balances in the place, that's data governance. So data stewardship piece is key to having that ability to bring the data together and to understand it. The other piece is where is the good data, where is the bad data? So we've all lived through experiences when people go to a specific data repository because it's run by a guy they know really well, and they know he's responsive if you call him in the middle of the day and he'll give you an answer. Whether or not that may not be the right place to get this data. So generally people try to get places from the data from the places that are convenient and easy to get to, as opposed to the right places where the data is right. So that's, again, data governance, authoritative sources of data becomes incredibly important. And then you need to understand the quality of this data. So what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. So having transparent data quality that's attached to all of your authoritative sources in the actionable way, again, that's back to data governance. If you know that your addresses aren't of good quality in that system, you're not going to try to rely on them when you master your data. So you can rank your sources, and data quality, again, is key for that. So if your data analytics, data science, the cool stuff to produce the right outcomes, you need to have data governance as in DNA and culture of the company to be able to produce those outcomes.
Okay. Again, Louise, as a practitioner, data governance and data quality, yes, important, but which bit's most important? How do you manage it all?
Yeah, I think in terms of data governance, I agree with Julia here. The main issue we had when we're implementing data governance at the moment, and the main issue is around ownership of that data, making sure that you have the right team who's the owner of that data, and ensuring that they then have stewards that then can look after that data. And I think that one is the first step. The second step is when you define the data, you make sure you define it correctly, because one of the things is other areas of the business, all they're looking for half the time is a number or a name or whatever type of data they're after. What they need to know is they need to know, okay, what is it that I'm after? And in data governance, by defining the data, then they will know what they can pick up. And, as Julia said, they'll know if it's correct or not, because within your data governance structure, and depending on what tools you use, it should clearly show you where that data is coming from. And, during the process that I've been going through, I think when we get to the end game, I think it will be very beneficial for the firm once we sign off the project, because at the moment you could have data going out that individuals don't know what it is that they're sending and if it's correct or not.
Yeah.
Okay. And data quality?
Yeah, so with data quality, it sort of goes back to, I think, throughout the data governance process, you do then realize what quality that data has. And depending on where your data sits in terms of ownership, that's where you have to go back to the owner, and then they might need to look at their op model and their processes to make sure that they have the appropriate sort of checks in place, exceptions, to make sure that the data that they are getting in and distributing to the business, is checked and is of quality rather than rubbish.
Okay. Yeah, data quality is always a big issue in these webinars and everything we do, but people are very aware of it now, which I think is a great improvement to some years ago. So that's great. Thank you both. We do have a few audience questions, so let's ask them, not all at once, but one at a time, but now. Dan, how about this one for you? We have a patchwork of legacy systems. How can we start to move towards bringing together client data at a cost and ROI that will win executive buy-in? We've talked about starting small and all that stuff, but how would you start? How would you keep the costs down? And how would you be able to show ROI?
Yeah, so I think, of course, you really do need to start small. I don't think there's much choice that you have otherwise. You need to start showing some real value quickly. And the way that you're doing that is by picking a specific slice of your domain and trying to understand what business value it could be. For instance, it could be something like client reporting or providing a client dashboard, for example. What specific data feeds do you need, or data sets do you need to be able to make that happen? And being by approaching it in a really super iterative manner, pulling just the data you need together to create those to create that application endpoint and the application for your end user from a single platform kind of shows immediate value, or we can quickly get to value of that data. I mean, from an ROI perspective, then of course, again, it comes down to trying to understand what the cost is of maintaining those legacy systems, the cost of not knowing where your data comes from, or not knowing the quality of your data, or that it's being the appropriate data quality rules applied to it, along with things like errors and remedial work and on the data. So there's a number of different metrics which you can use to show kind of ROI, but I think specifically it's demonstrating increased value to the business and providing those, I guess that trying to attempt to provide that panacea of those applications and those quick wins, I think is the good starting point.
Excellent. Julia, can I come to you this one? You talked about cloud, and the question asks, would you talk more about the challenges and opportunities of building a 360 solution in the cloud? Because a lot of people talk a lot about the cloud and great success, but there are challenges, and it isn't always as seamless as people might think.
Oh, it's not seamless at all. Going to the cloud is a huge project, and it's usually challenge. It's some of it technical challenges, some of it is cultural challenges. So one of the biggest things that happens often is people try to rebuild their data center on the cloud. So basically rebuild the tooling they have instead of using cloud native capabilities. And then it becomes, you don't get the advantage. So the main advantage of the cloud that I spoke about is that you reduce the cost and time to failure. But if you're rebuilding your data center on the cloud, it's going to take you a long time to bring things up, to try things, and so you kind of lose that advantage. So that's one of them, that it's culturally very complex to move the organization to the cloud, because people want to rebuild and build in the way they have been used to building and know how to deliver, and the cloud just requires you to think differently. So I think that's, to my mind, the main one. There is a skill set gap. There's a lot more people wanting to go to the cloud than there are people who know how and have done this before. So that's also one of the biggest challenges. I think the advantages, if done right, outweigh the challenges to the great extent. So I think everybody ought to try or to build the program, but understand it's not a money-saving proposition. That's another piece that gets programs in trouble. They're being seen as something that would save the company money. Most unlikely they won't. So it's not the bottom line enhancer. What it is agility and innovation and being able to bring the products in, and again, increasing resiliency to failure, which is, I think, very important to all the companies.
Okay. Coming to you, Louise, I'm going to wrap two questions together. So if you want to go, I'm going to think about this for a minute and I'll ask somebody else something, that'd be fine. But they are, how are you doing entity resolution across and within the data sets to ensure the master data is clean? And the other one is, how are you finding and making the linkage and relationships within and across different data sources to understand all the customer connections? So that's about knowing whether what you're putting together is clean in the master, and how you make all the connections to understand the relationships between the customers. Would you like a couple of minutes to think about that?
So I can talk through the second point.
Okay.
Obviously, because I head up the performance team, I don't get involved in the sort of architecture and the infrastructure that is put in place. However, I can tell you what I can see that happens within our architecture is whereby the way they link a lot of the data is this sort of what Julia referred to is a unique identifier. So the way the internal systems deal with it is they will have this unique identifier that then will be labeled across all your different data sets, which then will link all your systems together. And be it if they put it all into, a warehouse at the end of the day for someone to access on your out-of-the-box reporting tools, that's how all the linkage is done based on these unique identifiers. Now, if you go into granular data sets, more sort of line-by-line data, I think that's where I find, as a head of performance, more the op model slightly painful for my team. due to the way the linkage is together, because sometimes I don't want linkage. I just want people to see my data for how it is that I'm getting from my vendor. So linking it all together in internal systems sometimes does create other problems on top. However, it is what it is, and we deal with those issues. But all the internal systems, that's how we deal with it from a firm side.
Okay. On the entity issue, Julia, how can people achieve entity resolution and make sure the master is clean?
Well, it helps to have the source data clean, which never quite happens, but that's why data governance comes into play. Broadly speaking, there are two main ways practically to master data. So there is internally building the mastering, match and merge rules, and there are a bunch of products out there that help you with that, or some people even write their own. I don't recommend that. I do recommend using the tool available on the markets to implement match and merge rules. Improving, getting some cleanup, for example, for the addresses, if you're talking about the people, software out there that cleans up the addresses and can give you better matches as well. So that's for the internal piece. When you bring the data together and you have well-defined, business-defined match and merge rules that also aren't overly complicated, because the more complicated the rules, the more the stewardship queue is going to be. That's one of the things that we started out, the business came up with 30 rules. Like, if you do 30 rules on match and merge, you're going to have thousands of records you need to be able to manually reconcile. And so we're now to a much smaller amount, because you want to make sure that your stewardship work is actually can be done manually. And it's a balance, right? So if you're too permissive, you don't get good quality. But if you're not permissive, enough, nothing ever matches, and all you get is basically data stewardship manual queue. So might as well not do it. The second piece that I also like, that I've actually fairly recently realized that's a good way of doing it, is actually outsourcing. Send your data out. There are companies out there that will take it in and will match it against their own clean data set. And that's their job, and that's what they do. And they can provide you back with more data than you have internally. So I like that approach also quite a bit, is to be able to send that out and you come back with the key, and it's lovely. Obviously, you need to be able to not send PI data, like that. Limitations around that, right? So how do you deal with PI data? What kind of data you get back, and all of that. But I find the second approach is actually faster, cheaper, and easier than the first one, because building out match and merge rules together with the business, with the stewardship on top of it, which is needed in both cases anyway, does get very complicated.
Okay, thank you. And the last one for you, Dan, if you don't mind. With data mostly in silos, what is your opinion on a federated data architecture rather than building a centralized data architecture? Do you have a view on that one?
Yeah, I mean, we see that, and sometimes we implement solutions which are similar to that, where we end up storing active metadata about those source systems, and then leveraging that way. I think it depends on your type of solution, and I think what you're trying to achieve. For instance, federated solutions for some of our client-facing applications which we've built wouldn't work. There's too many hops in there, and then the response times can be poor. And of course, the response times for interacting with that data can be outside of the control of your applications. So yes, it's a nice idea just to leave the data where it is, but I think often that data is still existing within its original format. We still need to go through a transformation of that format every time, go through the reharmonization or curation of that data each time. So it depends on the solution. I mean, often we see that we actually find it more beneficial to consolidate the data into a single platform. And some of our clients ultimately switch off those original source systems as well. So they go through this process of not just consolidating data, but consolidating infrastructure as well as part of that process.
Okay, thank you. And coming back to our questions, Daniel, can you talk us through an example of a buy-side firm that has transformed its data management to gain insight into client data and gained other benefits and made better decisions?
Yeah, so I guess just following on from that question, we have a customer in the wealth management space. They're a wealth management organization as part of a larger investment bank, and they have consolidated data across their wealth management function. They've actually consolidated and switched off circa 24 systems in a central repository. And they've actually augmented that data with the data from external systems as well. So they're consolidating it into a centralized platform. As part of that consolidation process, they've applied data governance rules to it and data quality rules. So as data comes in from external systems and from the consolidating systems, they'll be able to apply those rules to ensure that they have good, clean data. Of course, they want to know where their data comes from. So as part of consolidating that into our single data platform, we've applied lineage as well, lineage metadata around that data also, so they can kind of pick where that data's come from, or understand where it's come from. So why have they wanted to do this? Well, for a number of reasons, and I guess we've touched on all these reasons actually during this conversation. One is client reporting, so internal and external BI tools for understanding their underlying their clients. For a client portal as well. So we talked earlier on about how they can provide great interaction or a better service for their high net worth individuals, or the mass affluent, as some of our clients like to call them, so that they can actually look at their portfolios and positions. So they've built off that same centralized repository. They've started to build new applications, which is great. So first stop, client portal, who knows what else they're going to build next, but they've got a well-maintained, well-governed, high-quality data platform which they can build all kinds of things off. They also drive some regulatory reporting off that as well. Of course, we all need to report to the regulators. But I guess for them, this set of curated data, the ultimate prize for them is, how can they leverage that for what we probably term deep analytics, or building predictive models by serving up that data into machine learning algorithms. And I guess that is the prize for many customers, is that they want to drive machine learning and predictive models on their data. However, data fragmented across the organization is never going to work with a machine learning algorithm. So they've actually now got that data in a curated space, and the journey which they're on, and the next step is, well, how can we leverage that data for greater insights? And for them, that means opening up to data science, and also looking at machine learning algorithms to better drive their business and be better predictive on their business and what their clients' needs are.
Excellent, thank you. We've just got time to run a final audience poll, and this one asks, what extent of operational benefits and competitive advantages is your organization gaining, or could it gain from a 360 customer view? So I hope this is going to be a nice positive outcome, but over to you to place your votes while I come over to Louise to talk about the operational benefits and competitive advantages of 360 as she sees them.
Yeah, so clearly, I think the operational benefits, one of them is the fact that all your data will be stored in one place, so then it can be monitored in this central location, which will mean that, your data team, can, instead of going to all your different systems all the time, everything is in that central location. They don't have to, spend a lot of time on monitoring other sort of data sources. So I think depending on the team that is involved in looking at your data sets, I think it's having that complete view from an operational point of view is obviously good for the data teams, but also for your users. So a lot of the time, what you'll find is users might have to go into not just different systems, different folder structures to pull all the data together. One, this will save them time, and it'll be a competitive advantage for us as a firm, because then you can reply to those clients and customers quicker than maybe other people can. Mm-hmm. So I think, you have two different angles here. And also, if you want to get down to sort of, I guess, resource and capacity constraints, a lot of the times firms have big teams is because they have to do a lot of manual intervention in pulling all of this data together. So one, you will save on resource where those people can actually add value to the firm in other ways.
Excellent. Thank you. Julia, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I completely agree with all the points Louise made, that the huge advantages to just knowing where your data is. A lot of people who are doing business reporting on the business side, highly paid, highly senior resources, spend about 80% of their time finding that last data attribute that they need for their reporting. And so now you get a lot more value out of that. There is also advantages if you do your data integration and the data integrations are streamlined. You have straight-through processing advantages. So you have a lot more straight-through processing through operational teams. So you have a significantly less manual intervention, manual checks, manual fixes. That's on the operational side, just streamline of the processes. People do their jobs as opposed to hunting around for data or fixing data. On the business advantage side is being able to understand how to deliver product to the customer in the way, the product they're looking for in the way they're looking for it. Some people want to have a phone call. Some people want to have a webinar. Some people want to have an email with the intellectual discussion of the market conditions. Who those people are. If you deliver a phone call to somebody who wants to have an email, you kind of lost them. So it's a competitive advantage to understand your customer and how they want to interact with you, what are they looking from you, and that leads to retention, to better customer outcomes, all the wonderful things about what understanding your customer brings. So I think it's on both sides, both operational efficiency, better use of money and resources, but also serving your customer better. That leads to retention and winning of the new customers, better experience.
Okay. Let's see what our audience thinks here. So can we see the poll results? Thank you. Yep, significant operational benefits, some competitive advantages, as you said. So yeah, that's looks good. Dan, what would you say to that result?
Yeah, I mean, that's in kind of typically in line with what we're seeing from our customers. You know, the benefits which they gain from their, it's effectively 360-degree view of their data. The wealth management firm I talked about, they're seeing significant improved interaction with their clients, and of course greater insight, and they're looking forward to understanding with some deep analytics and machine learning even further, even greater predictive insights from their data. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Okay, Louise, does that ring true for you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think because I look at it, I think from a 50-50 split here, just due to the fact that because I deal with a lot of sales and business development, a lot of the pressure that my team get is basically from that team that, you know, to win the business, you need to be able to deliver the complete, 360 experience. So even though I understand that operationally, there are a lot of benefits, I think from my team's point of view, it would be more sort of having that competitive advantage so we can deliver what we need to deliver and win those mandates for the business.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And coming to our final item today, I would like to ask all our speakers what advice they would give to data practitioners out there working to improve insight into customer data and business outcomes. And Louise, would you like to start here?
Yes, I can. So one of the things I would say is, always do your analysis of what you as a business need and what you think clients do need, because that's really important. So that's your first step. The second step is, during, your project meetings to work out what you need to deliver, make sure that you spend a lot of time on that operating model to make sure that everybody in the business knows what their responsibility is and can deliver on it. And I think that is really important. And then I guess at the end of it, you do need to then make sure that all the individuals that, use the data and on a daily basis do understand it. And that's where your data governance comes into it.
Excellent. Julia, some advice from you, please.
Understand the business impact of what you're delivering and communicate that business impact. Concentrate on mastering the data. Mastering the data, especially client data, is the core of any data program. So that gets to be done first, and a lot of concentration there pays off in the business benefits and business impact as well. And the third one, Don't forget data integrations. They're usually not part of overall master data programs, but they're the ones that really get you to this final, the last mile delivery. And if you forget about them, then basically a lot of value in doing all of this data work is lost.
Okay, and Dan, some final advice from you, please.
Yes, I guess from my perspective and what we've seen with our customers is that they're on a journey, and you should start with some small steps. So that's one. And I guess the next step then will be, I guess, to reiterate what Louise and Julia said, is let's define some of those business needs. In our projects, we work to define those business needs, the ones which are most important to solving your immediate problems. And then use those business needs to build and define programming interfaces, APIs for the business based on those requirements. And then leverage a data platform like our own to consolidate data, to master that data in a way which is iterative and over time. So consolidate that data, but then just choose the data items which you want to use to drive those business APIs. Just curate that data. That means you'll be able to get to value really super quickly, whereas previously using a traditional approach of mastering everything ahead of time, 2 or 3 years down the line, you still haven't got a data model that's working, and you've delivered no value. So it's kind of start small, define what you want, and then iteratively master the data that you need.
Thank you, and thank you to all our speakers for sharing their experience and expertise with us today. Thank you too to MarkLogic for sponsoring the webinar. It's been a very interesting conversation. Before we close up, I'd like to note that if you scroll down your screen, you can see some additional options where you'll see some A-Team resources that may be of interest to you. You can register for our virtual data management summit in New York City that we'll be hosting after the summer. And you can download the 8th edition of our regulatory data handbook, or the 7th edition of our entity data management handbook. They're obviously very popular. So you can find those if you click on the boxes on your screen. That said, that's it for today. So thank you again to Louise, Julia and Dan, and thank you to all of you who've taken part in the webinar. Please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again and goodbye.